So, good evening, everybody, and thank you for being part of these wonderful conversations that we are having every Thursday. And today is a very special day for me personally and for Soil because we are hosting Ravi. Ravi Venkatesan, I don't know how to describe him because he is a leader of a very unique kind. I don't know of anybody with this kind of profile who has with comfort moved from leading manufacturing companies to giving in the giving space to large technology companies to now doing something amazing with UNICEF. And so this kind of personality requires a very strong sort of inner sense of purpose and journey consciousness on taking responsibility for leading the life that he does. So Ravi, thank you very much. I don't want to tell everybody about all the wonderful things in your resume, but let me begin by welcoming you. Thank you for making the time.
Thank you, Anil. I'm really excited about this session and engaging with nearly 100 bright young people. So I'm grateful to you for extending the invitation.
Thank you, Ravi. Let me begin by asking that amongst all the things, Ravi, that you have done in your life over the years, what stands out for you as something which you did, which has given you the maximum happiness when you and the people you were working with did something really exceptional that made all of you very happy?
You know, I'm 57 years old, which must be unimaginable to some of the folks dialed in. So over nearly 40 years of working life, I've been very lucky to be part of many amazing things. So I'm struggling to single out one thing that stood out that was so particularly special, because I think many of them were special experiences. I think when I look back across them, what created the joy was a team coming together, working exceptionally hard, overcoming extraordinary obstacles to create something wonderful. And, you know, we all look back and sort of felt that was one of the more worthwhile things we did. So it is that human spirit. And I think I've been lucky that it happened so many times along the way, you know, ranging from turning around a dying plant, manufacturing factory in the US. I came back to India in 1996 to essentially do a job no one wanted, which was to close a failing joint venture between Cummins and Tata Motors and making it a spectacular success. I didn't, but it was, again, collective effort. Building Cummins in India to the powerhouse it is, where it contributes 20% of global profits. Being part of the Microsoft journey from, you know, nothing to what it is in India today. Helping make sure that Infosys remained an exceptional and strong company, being part of the transformation at Bank of Baroda and the units. Look, anybody should be lucky to have one of these adventures. I had all of them. So
that's what I said. You have an exceptional background, you know.
No. I think I've been exceptionally adventurous or foolish and exceptionally lucky. And but I think the joy, the achievement fades away over time. What remains clear and etched is the joy of working with so many people to produce this. So, yeah.
So let's start with your very first one, when you came back in the 90s to that Cummins joint venture with Tata Motors. And, you know, Tata Motors was my first job. So I subsequently heard about this from many people. What do you recall as the reasons how the team rallied around and what made it do exceptionally well?
No, look, when I was 32 years old. I'd never led anything as complicated as this. The only reason I got the job was nobody else wanted it.
I
Okay,
see.
nobody in their right mind with a reasonable future wanted to go to Jamshedpur and shut down a failing joint venture. So when I said I want to do it, the CEO of the company, great guy called Tim Solso, called me into his office and said, first of all, you don't have to do this. You have a bright career out here, okay? And number two, when I said I'm going to do it, he said, make sure you remember that the mission is to close it with minimum losses for Cummins. So don't get any crazy ideas. I landed in Jamshedpur on the 1st of October by the Shatabdi from Calcutta. And it was like culture shock, right? I've been from some nice city in the US to through Calcutta to Jamshedpur. And when I reached the factory, I was presented with multiple crises. First of all, there was no cash. And so we couldn't meet payroll. Then Tata Motors disconnected the power supply because we hadn't paid the bill. And they probably wanted to send us a message anyway. Then within 2 days, some guys drove up in Jeeps and they came into the office and said, look, we are the scrap contractors. Don't get any ideas out here. This is how it works in this place. So there was any number of sort of huge issues that I was confronted in. And I was 32. So, but I talked to everybody. One of the things I do well is when I get into a new situation, I just talk to lots of people and listen and try and piece together what's going on here. And it became very clear to me that maybe this place should close, but most of the problems are self-inflicted. So for a few months, let's just try and fix some of these self-inflicted wounds. One of them is, look, the joint venture partners hate each other because the JV agreement is unfair. It's completely in favor of Cummins and completely against Tata Motors. So it's like sticking in their throat. So we need to renegotiate a more fair agreement. It's about building relationships. So I built relationships. I don't know if you remember Praveen Kadle and
Yes.
Vinod Raval.
Yes.
So look, it's my job to get along with them, not their job to support the JV. So we built relationships, and then I rallied the team, which was a fantastic team. All of them went on to do just crazy things in life, amazing things in life. Many, many CEOs were born from that crucible of leadership called Tata Cummins. And we said, look, number one, we've got to reduce the cost of the engine by 85% in 1 year if we have to survive.
Wow.
Now, most people think 85% cost reduction in 1 year. I mean, what's wrong with us? Well, we did it and then blew past it. Okay, now there were so many quality issues with the truck or the bus, not the engine per se, but so we said, all right, let's get teams working on each quality issue. And so that happened. So when you fix the problem, you fix the cost and the economics, and the relationship with the JV partner improves, suddenly the damn thing began to take off. So there was no magic, and we just took a lot of people along. There was a time when there was no work in the factory. The factory that was supposed to produce 250 engines a day was producing 2 engines a day. And so we said, all right, let's shut down. And I told the union, let's send everybody back to their homes, their villages. But we'll pay them, but let them go out and just talk to customers and send reports back. So every associate went out and talked to customers, and that created such a culture, a customer-centric culture. It was completely unprecedented. So anyway, we just figured it out and worked incredibly hard. Sorry, I can go on and on and on.
How wonderful. So while doing this, and you have done many such things of leading organizations, facilitating change to the next level, help me to understand that in all this work that happened over the years in different organizations, what did you learn about yourself and the special things that you really both enjoyed doing and you were good at doing?
Yeah. Look, I didn't start out trying to think about what I was good at and therefore what should I do or any such thing, nor I simply every few years took on a new challenge based on what opportunity presented itself and what I was interested in. That's why it feels a bit random, going from making diesel engines and gensets to Microsoft to Bank of Baroda to UNICEF to doing starting my own foundation, etc. Very, very random things. But the common thread is I followed my curiosity and I did things that gave me joy. Okay, I didn't do things if they didn't give me joy just because everybody else was doing it, there was more money in it, or whatever. Usually, I was spectacularly unqualified to take on anything I did. So I remember, for instance, in 2015, Raghuram Rajan, who was governor RBI, called me and said, look, we're going to really fix the banking system and we'd like you to become the chairman of Bank of Baroda. I said, Raghu, you got to be crazy because I'm neither a banker nor do I understand public sector. He said, well, you can't do worse than the guys who came before you. Okay. So I said, okay. So and as I said, I took the Cummins job because nobody was willing to do it. I did Microsoft. It's really funny because I was interviewed by Bill Gates. And the only reason I went for the interview is because I'll get to meet Bill Gates. This is 2003. And I said, very honestly to Bill, I don't even do email. Okay, my secretary prints out my email and gives me a folder at the end of the day and I mark it up and give it back to him. So he laughed. He said, it's okay. At least then you'll listen. So every job I've done is not because I was qualified to do it. I was fascinated by it. An opportunity presented itself, and I thought it would give me joy. Over time, as I reflect on what worked, what didn't work, I became clearer about, there's kind of a pattern here. I like big challenges. I'm good at a couple of things, not many things, but I'm good at getting people excited about something and working together to achieve something big. And that's the pattern that's kind of repeated itself. Probably good at communicating, writing, and speaking about things, but not much else. But passion is contagious. If you love what you do, there's an energy that you radiate that's like a black hole or a white hole that sucks in others. And that's the advice I would have for everyone. Just really, really, whatever you choose to do, and if you're confused about what to do, figure out something that's at the convergence of what you love, what you're good at, and what the world needs. And somewhere in that convergence zone, lies a lot of happiness and success.
I think what a nice thing to say, because this is exactly what the Japanese whole concept of ikigai is that we are talking about, which is such a wonderful, sort of way of looking at it.
It's not unique.
No, but it's a very nice way of looking at it. Ravi, I want to ask you a question amongst the things that you did. And, one of the things, the reason I think I have a perspective on this, the reason you were so successful, not only because of your passion and communication and this ability to inspire, but perhaps you had something called the unschooled mind. You were not biased and you were not invested into the reasons why the company was there it is. So,
look, I think there's several reasons.
Yeah.
When you look back at why there's been reasonable success. I think one is very much I think the Buddhists call it Zen mind, beginner's mind. How do you always have a childlike curiosity?
Yes.
So you're willing to listen, try unorthodox things, you're receptive like a sponge, rather than saying, we tried that 22 years ago, it didn't work then, it won't work now. So that's one. I think there's 2-3 other factors. The second is just a capacity for hard work and what is called grit or tenacity. Look, when people say, what is the secret of success? Much of it is just this underrated thing about I'm willing to work much harder than anyone else. Okay. As I said, I'm 57 years old. I'm fairly successful. I don't have to prove anything. and I'm working 14 to 16 hours a day. I don't have to. Okay.
Yes.
I do it because I love it. Okay. But this capacity for hard work, not giving up, just tenacious till you solve the problem. You just keep at it. Try different things till you succeed. That's really important. And the third thing I would say is take people along. Okay. If you don't take people along, stakeholders, employees, whatever, everything, it's hard to succeed. If you get everybody working sort of reasonably together, despite they may not like each other. I've never been part of leaders where teams where all the people are harmonious, and no, you may not like each other, but you're there. You know why you're there to solve a problem and be successful. And the final thing is luck. And look, I would not underestimate the importance of luck. So yeah, and so all these factors make a difference.
Yeah. Ravi, in the work that you're doing with UNICEF, now this is before we started having this conversation part of the webinar, your face came alive when you were talking about the potential of the large-scale impact, all over the world. So can you share a bit more about what this is about? Because you seem very energized. Yes.
Yeah. So first of all, I want to talk about what it is I'm doing with UNICEF.
Yes.
About 2 years ago, UNICEF started a global mission called Generation Unlimited. And it started this mission largely because I think today young people, and definition is 18 to 24 globally, they're facing a very, very different world than the world that you and I grew up in and did well at. So there's a world where everything is fluid, everything is changing, and the old success formulas are gone. The education systems everywhere in the world, not just India, are not preparing young people for the future, for the world we're living in. So Henrietta Fore, who's the executive director, and Antonio Guterres, who's the secretary general, said, let's create a mission that engages young people and prepares them for this kind of crazy world. And I had reached, at that point, 2 years ago, my own conclusion, which is the single biggest issue in our world today across countries is the lack of leadership. Sure, we have many problems. Some of them are small, some of them are huge, like climate change. India's problems are specific and US problems are different. But across all these things, the single biggest issue why problems don't get solved, but become bigger and bigger, is because of lack of leadership. And the problem is we look to people with formal authority and power to provide leadership. So you look to Donald Trump or Prime Minister Modi or some senior bureaucrat or a CEO or someone to actually take the lead in solving these issues. And it doesn't happen. And it's not going to happen because the people, as Einstein said, it's unlikely that the same thinking that created the problem will solve it. So disproportionately, I felt that the leadership must come from young people who have, who don't know what is impossible, who got fresh minds, incredible energy, willing to take risks, think orthogonally. And so how do we engage 1.8 billion and not think about it as what skill should I give them to get a job? I think that is such a pathetic framing. The framing should be, how do I engage these young people so that they become change leaders in the communities in which they live, the societies in which they live? How do they transform things around them? And then how eventually do you connect them so that the world itself tips in a different direction? And on my own, I can do nothing. But I said, UNICEF gives us such a wonderful platform to be able to build this on a global basis. So I took it on. And that's what we're trying to do. So in India, we started in November. It's still very young, but we're launching in Punjab this month and 4 other states soon after. And we want to get millions of young people engaged first and foremost as volunteers in a time of crisis, COVID, and see what it is they can do and use that volunteering activity to enhance their self-confidence, their sense of agency, their leadership qualities, etc. And after that, we'll think about other skills and all that you layer on. But this is what we're trying to do.
Oh, wonderful. And for your pilot in these few places, how many people are you expecting for them to sort of enroll and sign up for this volunteering effort?
One of the central ideas that I've put out there is that we need to get to population scale. Okay, so if you're in a state and you're not over 5 years getting to 80% of the young population, and this is true therefore globally as well, then you're missing the point. There are too many good programs that say declare success at 10,000 people. And sure, for those 10,000 people, it's life-changing, okay? But as a planet, we need to get to some very, very large numbers, or else we're not going to be successful. And so we can't think in linear terms. We're not building an organization. We're trying to build a movement, okay? And therefore, one of the critical differences in the design of this Gen U is we are not doing things to and for young people, okay? Young people are at the center. Now we need to ask them, what do you need in order to do things? So, by the way, one of the most amazing programs that my colleagues are running, and I don't take any credit, is in the Delhi schools, government schools, and you'll know this, with this great leadership and support of Manish Sisodia. We're running the entrepreneurship program in 1,024 Delhi schools. So 7.5 lakh young people from standard 9 to 12 get up every day, and their first compulsory subject is entrepreneurship. And they have to learn by launching a business. And again, entrepreneurship is just a Trojan horse for changing their self-confidence, their belief in what they can do, getting excited about life, etc., etc.
How very nice. In fact, we too in School of Inspired Leadership have this special track on entrepreneurship, because that's the whole idea of getting people the voice to their inner sort of desire to make a difference. So you channel it there. Ravi, I want to ask you a question. Amongst all the things you did, was there some moments where, things didn't quite turn out to be the way you expected, what we in a traditional form call failure, and sometimes that's a setback? And how did you deal with that? This is one of the questions that I often ask myself whenever these things have happened in my life.
Look, again, you don't get to this point in life without encountering setbacks many times. And you encounter setbacks in your education, you encounter setbacks in your professional life, you encounter setbacks in your personal life. So I've had, a reasonable share of setbacks. For instance, I was very bright academically, hardworking, doing well in school. And it was always expected back in the 70s that he would go to IIT, okay, or to a good medical school like All India Institute or whatever. For whatever reason, it ended up taking 3 efforts to get into IIT with the department of my choice. I got into IIT all 3 times, but to get the department I wanted, it took 3 efforts. And it was a bit crushing. And, when you're 17 years old, your family's burden of expectations are there, and you didn't do well. It gets pretty depressing. And, sometimes some really bad thoughts cross your mind about, whether it's worth continuing. So, did that. I didn't get into Harvard Business School the first time. It took me 2 attempts to get into Harvard Business School. All the things that eventually were seen as success, it wasn't evident in the beginning or even towards the end that it was going to be successful. I remember being panic-stricken at Bank of Baroda 2 years into the journey, and there was no green shoots. So I said, man, I put my reputation out here. How are we going to transform this bank? And it's 2 years into a 3-year journey. So, Churchill says it beautifully. He says, success is not final, nor is failure fatal. It is the ability to continue that matters. So, yeah, setbacks are natural. If you don't have setbacks, it means you're not extending yourself enough. You're being very safe. It is your capacity to, when you trip and fall over, to dust yourself up and, stand up and keep going. That counts. And, it's every human being has this trait. When you think about just a child learning to walk, how many times we fall down and keep going till we learn to master the simple act of walking and running. But later on, there is this conditioning that happens where falling down or stumbling is seen as failure. So I think you have to go back to your earlier question about that more childlike state, where you just simply joyously, not cussedly keep going. No, joyously say, look, Edison. He had tried 999 things and for the filament of the bulb, and he says that these are not failures. I know 999 materials that don't work.
Don't work. That's right.
And the 1001st is a spectacular success, which was carbon coated filament. Yeah. So this is what is called grit or tenacity or whatever. It's the capacity to keep going when there's a headwind. And it's one of the single most important determinants of what you eventually achieve with your life. And
in the audience, we have Naushad Khurodi and his daughter, Khurshid Khurodi, who know you well.
I do. They threatened to dial in. I don't know if they're there. I advised against it.
No, they're there. And when I was just exchanging messages with Khurshid, actually, about your conversation today, she was also curious to learn from you. How are you reading this whole pandemic and this crisis? And how should the young people be responding to this? And there are lots of things going on about the future of work and how will the world be and so on and so forth. But what are your own insights you want to share to the young people on how they may look at the world and how they may need to respond in this crisis?
Well, a lot of opinions on this, so mine is just one more opinion. But I think we're headed into a world which used to be called VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, it is impossible to predict. Okay, the COVID is just one aspect of it. So how long will this last? When will the vaccine be available? When will the economy be able to restart? When will we go back to anything resembling the last year's level of Nobody knows. We're all guessing. There are also events which are happening which nobody could have predicted. We wouldn't have predicted India and China coming to blows in this way with the sort of consequences it has. We wouldn't predict many things in the US, the protests against racism, and so on and so forth. The world has become it's going through a transition. So in evolutionary biology, there's this term called punctuated equilibrium, which means what? That there are long periods where the world is stable, and then some event happens, and there's a crazy amount of change in a very short period of time. Like an asteroid hits the Earth, and 99.999% of all living things become extinct because they can't adapt, including dinosaurs. So we're going through one of these periods of extreme change before we get to a new period of stability. When will that new period be? Nobody has any idea. It could be 50 years. It could be, it's not imminent. So we need to become comfortable with extreme uncertainty and fluidity. Okay, the kind of stable world we've had, largely stable world we've had for 30, 40 years is over. So it requires a very different mindset and an approach and a skill set to survive and succeed. And that's true for young people or old guys like us. It doesn't matter. So I keep telling young people, forget about a job. Job was an industrial era construct where, in exchange for your commitment and hard work, an employer said, here's a guaranteed monthly amount of money, some security, some pension and health benefits, and yeah, you can climb a ladder if you work really hard. That construct is breaking down super fast, and COVID has, completely melted it down. Most young people or old people now have to think about life not as a job or a set of 3 jobs over your career. You have to think about your life as a series of projects, okay? And sometimes a project may last multiple years with a single organization. And sometimes you'll be doing 3 projects at the same time, one of which is paid for and 2 which you do for the joy of it or for learning or whatever. So you have to get comfortable with a very different framing of what work, career, etc. is like. I would think that, as I said earlier, the most important thing the world needs right now is leadership. And leadership is not a title, it's not a formal authority or anything. Leadership is an act. And so I like to say that it's not an adjective that describes someone. It's a verb, okay? It's how you act in the moment that matters. And we need everybody listening into this to act like more of a leader in more and more situations that they care about. So I'll give a very simple, since a lot of the people dialing in are young people. So Shaheen Mistry at Teach for India told me this story about this young boy called Rehan. He lives in outside Ahmedabad. He's 11 years old, now he's 12. And he lives in the midst, with his family, in the midst of a municipal garbage dump, okay? So these and some other families are living there, and every day trucks come and dump the whole garbage of the city of Ahmedabad out there. You can imagine how oppressive the environment must be. Just stink, fetid stuff flowing, and you're supposed to live and learn there. So what this young guy does is he starts organizing his friends and they set up a learning center. So there's no school nearby, so they set up a learning center and they start doing it. Then they start segregating waste. Then they they started petitioning the municipal authorities to move the waste side. Now the municipality has agreed, okay? And he's now part of an NGO it's a very small NGO. Point is, he's 12 years old, okay? He has no formal authority. This is the kind of leadership we need, and there is no sanction that you need to do it. You have to follow your conviction. Nobody gave Gandhiji the authority to lead the freedom struggle, okay? And, recently I created a task force. I helped convene a task force of people to look at the plight of small businesses in India and make very clear recommendations on what we need to do to ensure the survival and prosperity of our small businesses in India. We released our report on Saturday. Along the way, somebody very senior said, this sounds really good, but who are you and why are you doing this and who asked you to do it? Okay, and the answer is nobody asked me to do it. I just felt that this is such a crucial issue. And nobody gave me any formal authority. I just called a bunch of people and they felt moved and decided to give their time. I think this is the behavior that we need to see from more and more young people. Don't just settle for some job. And now they may say, oh, it's fine for some guy who's from Microsoft and made some money to say this. But really, I mean it, which is, of course, you have to put food at the table and, be comfortable and have your needs met. But I think it's far more important when you look back to have, been lived a life which, where you felt that you did the things you cared about. So being a leader is important. I would say, as I said earlier, don't underestimate the importance of just hard work and tenacity. So much of success is just these things. I think being excellent. One of the things, I'm writing a book, and this book is intended for young people on how to flourish in a post-COVID world. Hopefully in the next 3 months, I'll get it out there. I think it's very important to take on difficult challenges, meaningful challenges, and then make a success of it. So if I look at my life, this is not how I planned it, but every 6 or 7 years, I walked away from success and took on something new and difficult, and then worked really hard to make that happen. That's what I'm doing right now with entrepreneurship, with the youth mission, etc. So take on challenges and be excellent. The difference between being excellent and being mediocre is like day and night. The world is becoming a very, very unequal place. There's the top 1%, and then there's the 99%. The middle is being eviscerated. There is no middle. Okay. So it's really important that you be exceptional at whatever you do. It doesn't matter whether you're going to be a stand-up comedian, an artist, a cook, an engineer, an entrepreneur. It doesn't matter what you do. But whatever you do, I think the world today is very unforgiving of people who are just kind of going along, mediocre, etc. And final thing I would say is stay humble.
So Ravi, before now I open it up, I think there are several people who are already raising questions. So let's begin by some of the questions.
Sure. Will I see the questions, or you're going to read them?
I'm going to read them, but you can also read them. But they are appearing both in chat as well as on the Q&A. So I'll just keep reading out.
Sure.
So Sneha Yadav, who's a young student in Soil, says, your life story is extremely motivating. With all your experience, can you please throw light on what are the key ingredients of a strategy to outsmart competition?
I think that's an interesting question. And there's a young guy I just met last week called Utkarsh Amitav. Look him up on LinkedIn. He said he said it beautifully. He said, each one of us is unique. Okay. We are unique there's just no one exactly like you, Sneha, with the same skills, the same background, same interests, or the same sense of purpose. And therefore, if you actually have the courage to be you and figure out your path, then there is no competition. Okay. Competition is when you're going along with a thundering herd of bright young people looking for the 2 jobs out there. Okay. So you don't want to do that. So he said it really beautifully, and I would encourage you to look him up on LinkedIn because he's put some good posts on this. And he compares this to the old business idea of blue oceans versus red oceans. So swim to areas which are unique, following your passion, your interest, what you're good at, your calling. And the chances are there is no competition. Okay. So Wonderful. It's a framing.
Absolutely. In fact, I've always told in all the companies that I have co-founded, I've always told my colleagues, never consider a competitor in that sense, because we are all part of the same industry. There is enough. You have to excel in what you do.
Yeah, so I want to add to that, Anil. Yeah. As you look back at life, once you cross 45 and you sort of little humility creeps in, you will realize that the biggest obstacle to your own success is you.
Yes.
It is not some other person. It's not your manager. It's not HR. It's not your wife, your mother, the planet. None of these things. It is you, and you are the biggest obstacle. And therefore you have to get out of your own way if you're going to go all the way. So this idea of competition has to be, I think, nixed.
Thank you, Ravi. Sanjay Chaudhary, who's been working with Tata, he's a former colleague of mine from Aisha Consulting. He says you came as an outsider to Tata Cummins. Vishal Sikka was an outsider in Infosys during your board tenure. Without parting any confidential information, what do you think could have been done differently during that time by Vishal and the board?
I think the two situations were quite different. Okay, very different. In Infosys, we had a situation, there were so many changes going on. In 2014, there were three big shifts that were happening at the same time, which we realized afterwards. One is it was the founders all left at the same time. It was moving from a founder-led company to a professional company. The board was moving from being an executive board to a non-executive board. Vishal was the first outsider as a CEO in the history of the company. And the industry was in transition. Okay, so the business model of Infosys and everybody else was going through profound change. I mean, any one change is kind of daunting. Here we had 4 changes packaged into one. Obviously, I want to be sensitive to everybody who was part of that journey. But I do think that if you're in the hot seat as the CEO, one of the things you have to do very well is stakeholder management. You have to understand who are the key stakeholders and take them along, okay? And I think that is just a good lesson universally. So if I look at a different context where I was the chairman at Bank of Baroda, okay? It was an interesting thing because I took the role because both the finance ministry and RBI wanted me to take it. Then comes the appointment letter. It had 3 pages of points of what decisions I could not take, what I was not authorized to do. It said nothing about what I could do. Okay, so I realized, holy cow, I'm supposed to do a transformation, but I have no authority. Okay, that's what this says. Don't even pretend that you have any authority. So I said, okay, fine. So who are the stakeholders in this? Well, RBI is a critical stakeholder. Ministry of Finance, DFS is a critical stakeholder. My own board is important, okay? And then, of course, there is a senior team that has to be taken along. I spent an enormous amount of time, more time than on making sure that I had the goodwill of RBI and Ministry of Finance and the board, okay? And that allowed me to give air cover to the management to do the enormous number of difficult changes they carried on. And if I hadn't done that stakeholder management, we couldn't have done anything. Okay, and so I think that's the difference, if Sanjay. And I think I did a spectacular job in retrospect, looking back 20 years ago, at managing the stakeholders at Tata Cummins, which is 2 crucial but very, very different partners.
Thank you. Niveda, who's one of our young students in our new cohort, she is asking a question. The young people, as you mentioned, sir, are somewhat stereotyped to think in a way that leadership is linked to experience they get, irrespective of the creativity they possess and the monetary benefits. However, the same has been framed by our society. When young people choose to take risks while being an entrepreneur, society sometimes pushes them back. And so how do you think we can deal with that? In other words, how can we come through all these roadblocks and unleash the leader within ourselves, especially in the current situation?
So as I told you, first of all, you don't need any formal authority or mandate from anyone to be a leader. You have to simply live your conviction, okay, whatever you're convinced about. And second is you've got to very quickly develop a clarity that where you're not looking for affirmation from the people around you, okay? If you're going to drive change, if you're going to do something truly original, you should quickly disabuse yourself that people are going to be cheering and applauding along the way, okay? You have to find other sources of energy, conviction, reinforcement. So particularly if you're truly driving change, real change, you will be opposed like crazy, okay? So if you look at anything great, think about the freedom struggle. Yeah, they were beaten, they were imprisoned, their own families questioned them, and yet the leaders of our freedom struggle kept going. That's leadership. You see the same thing. You look at Tesla Motors. Yesterday, it just became the most valuable car company in the world, crossing the valuation of Toyota. Okay. 18 months ago, it was on the edge of bankruptcy. Okay. The short sellers were shorting the stock. The SEC was investigating Elon Musk. Investors were not willing to put in more money. His own family was questioning his sanity, saying, well, you're doing the space mission as well as this, as well as transforming energy. Can you focus on one thing, etc.? But whatever, he has the courage and the tenacity to persist, and yeah, now everybody is cheering and applauding. So in the end, if you're successful, many people would cheer you along, but disabuse yourself that you're going to have lots of people egging you on along the way. You have to find other sources of conviction and reinforcement. Am I making any sense here, or am I rambling?
Absolutely, you're making wonderful sense. So let me ask you another question that the audience is raising, which is something, in fact, somebody from IIT Mumbai who is in fact inquiring about which hostel were you in? And
H3 room 335.
Okay. And here is his other question about his business. What can industry do? He's in the textile value chain industry, one of the largest job creators, yet potential is not even realized to basic level. So what can people in this industry do to come together to bring export to the US and Europe business from China, which is dominating that? So how can we replace China in the global market in that area? What are your initial thoughts?
Well, there was a very, very good journalist from Mint,
Yes.
Prashant, I forget his name, and he did a superb conversation with me, which is a one-page interview which appeared in Mint on Monday.
Yes.
I touch on this quite a lot.
Yes.
But one of the things to realize is, yes, India now has an opportunity to take share away from China because of the realignments that are going on globally between the US and China, Europe and China. However, it is not going to happen because the government said so. It is going to happen, if it does, because entrepreneurs like this gentleman go to the US and go bag orders. And despite the enormous difficulties in India of doing anything, ease of doing business or lack thereof, make a success of it. Okay. So I pointed out in the interview that why is it that during Ganesh Chaturthi time, a lot of the idols are made in China? Why is it so many of our Rakhis are imported from China? Why is it? Yeah, we can go on and on and on. It's not because Chinese government said so. It's because hungry entrepreneurs come here and understand the opportunity and find a way to do something about it. If you look at India's export success, there are rather few. It's in IT services, it's in pharmaceuticals, and two-wheelers. Okay, and some stray stuff. It didn't happen because the government decided we're going to be a leader in IT. It didn't happen because of it happened because some really remarkable individuals saw an opportunity and went out there and did whatever it takes. And then they united and lobbied the government to create slightly more favorable conditions for their industry. Okay, so textile is like that. We have completely blown our opportunity and ceded it to Vietnam and China and Bangladesh. but there's still a large opportunity. India has lost a lot of its competitiveness because of labor laws, cost of energy, logistics, all these issues. But if he's a great entrepreneur, he has to find a way to go get orders despite it. And then we should all join hands and push the state and central governments to make it a little bit more easy to compete. But the leadership has to come from leaders like him.
Yeah. So there are several other questions. The speed with which people are asking are quite a few. So, and one of our alumni, Devendra, is very familiar with your live interview and therefore was asking. Himanshu Jani, who's been global head of HR of multinational companies, and he's talking about how many insights these are coming for people, even for somebody as experienced as him. But and along with him, another person is asking, what are some of the best books you would recommend to young folks like me to read today to make a difference? Do you have some particularly good books for young people to read in the times of today?
Well, I would say read widely. Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, right now, for instance, just yesterday, I bought Thoreau's Walden, on Walden Pond. I'd read it many years ago, but it has fresh meaning today at this point in my life. Okay. So what is disappointing is to see the erosion of the reading habit amongst everybody, not just young people, but everybody. We all just read very little. And I think that's a real risk because things are changing so fast that if the only thing you're reading is email or some garbage on the internet or social media, you're at a very big disadvantage. So rather than me say, here are the 3 books I would read, I'd say get into a reading habit. Read anything you enjoy and then read more, and cover as much canvas as you can across disciplines, across time. Again, the things that really matter to us as people, there's nothing new. It was said 3,000 years ago, and it's being just repackaged in new ways. So there's great joy in reading classics. Yeah, so that would be my advice. And read my book. It'll be coming out in a few months, so look for it.
Your previous book, somebody was saying it's difficult to get hold of a copy of that book with that.
The previous book is called Conquering the Chaos.
Yes.
It was published by Harvard Business Review.
Yes.
And the problem is it's expensive.
Yeah.
So, but it's been very popular. Yeah. So HBR will probably do a paperback soon, which makes it more affordable and accessible. Okay. But it's available as a much cheaper Kindle download for those who want to do it. And if you absolutely can't afford it, write to me and I'll find a way to get you.
How nice, Ravi. Monica Tata from Portugal, she's been part of all our Thursday program, and she's one of those very conscious of serving the planet. So she said, just because some of us may be over 40, I have to ask you, do you believe that inspiring guidelines and positive disruptive action, let's call it leadership, can only come from young people? Or better, what is young? And young at heart? Or, so, she wants, or is it the diverse collaboration that will promote this holistic sort of an inclusive well-being of the planet?
I think in asking the question the way she has, she's answered it.
Yes. Yes,
so, Monica, look, chronologically, I'm not young.
Yes.
So I'm a huge believer. First of all, Linda Grattan wrote this book called The 100-Year Life.
Yes.
The fact is that many, 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 many more people with reasonable healthcare and nutrition were living into our 90s, which means you want to be engaged and productive till you're in your 80s.
Yes.
And so I think it'll be lethal to go into retirement mode. There is no retirement. There's just reinvention. Yes. John Rockefeller, whose board I serve on, said that a man must die in the saddle. Obviously, men, women, whatever. But the point is, you should, be active and engaged till the end. And that's how you live a meaningful life. And so I think the thing is, if you're going to live and be engaged and vibrant till you're in your 80s, which I hope you are and I am, then the question is, along the way, how do we take on fresh challenges and reinvigorate ourselves? The only reason I keep talking about young people is it is disproportionately their world.
Yes.
Okay? When I think about nearly 60. Just statistically, more of my life is behind me than ahead of me. The converse is true when you're 20 or 30. Okay, so it's disproportionately their world, their future. And that's why I orient much of my messaging towards that young cohort. But it's true for every one of us.
Sure. Dr. T.V. Rao, he is here and he experienced your leadership style in Tata Commons in early part of your work. He still has your 360-degree feedback with him. And he says your unusual leadership and empowering leadership style were evident even at that time. So he's recalling that fondly.
He's a very kind man. Yeah. Hello, Dr. Rao.
Yeah. So Dr. Virender Sangwan, who came back after doing some amazing work on eye surgery and vision in the US, and then came back to LV Prasad and now with Shroff Hospital in Delhi. He says, my question is how to engineer good health delivery for rural India.
How do you do that?
Yes. Any insights about how that might be done?
Well, look, he knows, probably forgotten more about it than I know.
Yeah.
Okay. And we've met, and I know his reputation, it's formidable. But if you're going to solve one of these big problems, the way to do it is very, very, very deep insight. So what you need to do is go to the village and wallow and understand what are the ways in which the current system is failing. And from that, you develop the insights to try and develop a hypothesis or of a very radically different way of delivering it. And then you build a prototype and learn from that. So that's how I think you solve any difficult or problem that hasn't been solved before. So it's broadly called design thinking, and I would, if he is not aware of it, I'd encourage him to learn about design thinking and practice it. And I think the way you're nodding, you could probably have a good conversation.
Yes, in fact, just this afternoon, I was facilitating a session for Dr. Sanguine and the leadership team of Shroff Hospital, and I was talking to them about design thinking and how it might be done better. So, so wonderful. Thank you, Ravi, for reinforcing that. Ravi, this is coming to the end of the hour. So I just want to summarize the 5 key lessons I'm taking from you today. 1, you have this exuberance that comes from the curiosity. You have the agility of your mind because you read with your whole mind and you think with your whole mind. It's not just the analytical mind. 3, you are very willing to share credit with others. And even though you have had exceptional achievements, you've always underplayed your own self and you talked about how we did it. So that's something very, very nice. Number 4, your belief in the young people is so infectious because I completely agree with you. I think the young people that we work with every day, they are the ones who are thinking with a fresh mind. And I believe they are far more ethical. They care far more for the planet. So I think that is very infectious. And lastly, I just love the scale at which you think. My spiritual teacher used to tell me, Swami Chinmayananda, he would say, if your imagination is also miserly, how can you develop a vision? So he said, the vision in life is not just setting a goal and achieving that. It is to surrender your life in the service of that vision. And so that is the point. So, I just wanted to feel that energy was, bubbling up within me, because many things that you said resonated deeply with who I am as a person. So thank you. Thank you for bringing out a special part for all of us this evening.
Oh, thank you for this conversation. It was very, very skilled at coaxing out things from me, and the way you summed it up makes me feel much better about myself and my life. So thank you.
Thank
And
you.
thank you all for coming in and listening. And if you wish to continue some sort of a conversation, we do so over LinkedIn. Okay. Good luck.
Thank you, Ravi. Thank you. And thank you, everybody. And look forward to hosting you next week when we are with Nitin Paranspe of Unilever. So thank you very much.
And remind them to stay safe.
Yes. Stay safe. Take care of yourself and your loved ones and people around you. Thank you very much. Thank you.